Welcome to Commander Central episode 21, our first episode of 2018, and our special bulk binder edition, where we're going to talk about dollar cards, jank, and cheap, inexpensive options for your deck. We'll see if we can find any dimes, which is probably a nickel more than most of my thoughts are worth. I'm being generous. First, though, we'll check in social media, see if anything is happening out there. We'll discuss any news in the world of EDH, and we'll discuss some games we played. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
How's everyone doing on this wonderful Wednesday?
It's warm.
It is. Well, by comparison, it's warm.
Yes.
I went outside at noon, and I was sure it was like 30 degrees out because it was sunny and people were walking around with no jackets on, and it was 8 degrees. I checked the thermometer; it was 8.
Well, you do realize global warming is not a thing because it's cold outside.
Right. If it's cold at my house, global warming is a lie. But after being like 15, that's how that works. But after being like 15 below for the last 2 weeks, 8 degrees felt pretty nice. I'll take it.
That's for sure.
Yes.
It was still very cold out this morning when I got up and took my son to school. I ain't gonna lie, like I walk outside, I'm like, no, we're going inside and we're gonna put on my snow bibs. We're gonna walk with snow bibs on.
Well, I can't remember one day I just woke up in the morning and it was just a text from Max. I was like, why do we live in the tundra?
It's better than hurricanes is what we came to.
I guess.
I would rather live somewhere where it hurts my face instead of having poisonous snakes and
Scorpions.
evil spiders. And
that is very true. I tend to kind of agree with that. Anyone play any good games this week?
Somewhat, I guess. I've been playtesting a lot of Modern, so.
But you actually did play it, so I played a couple games.
I played quite a, let's see, 1, 2, 3 or 4 Commander games last night.
Nice.
Max played mostly just Brago.
I played mostly Brago last night, and then I played Brago quite a bit on New Year's Eve at Blake's house.
So how was it playing after the changes you made?
So Chris and I sat down, and we made a lot of changes. We cut the lands down to 34, and the mana rocks went up to 8, and we took out some creatures that were just dirtily like Core Cartographer.
Which is a fine card, but like in that deck, you'd hit that point where you're just blinking it and getting lands out that weren't actually getting you anything.
Right, and it's a cute card. It's a version 1 card, and now we're in version 2.
Sure, that makes sense.
And we put in a lot more draw.
A lot of draw.
Yeah.
Well, like we said, is it draw that's not dependent on Brago, too?
Yes. I mean, I put Chart the Course in there. I put an Anticipate in there. And a couple others. I just can't remember them off the top of my head.
Those are always nice just to get you to where you have to be, too.
Yeah, some low curve stuff that'll help you to get online. Like, say you're down lands, because you are running lower lands. Sometimes you need to go for a land, so the extra card draw helps you stay online.
For sure.
Yep. So on New Year's Eve, I played it at Blake's, and I ended up playing with his roommate and his friends who are new to EDH. And I warned them. I said, this is probably my best deck at the moment. Do you care if I play it? Because I just made a bunch of changes. And they said, yeah, we want to see what it does. Well,
that's how you learn by touching the fire.
Exactly. They all got burnt. The game ended, and I posted the pic on Twitter with a huge board state of mind. I had Jace, Bellerin out, and Venzer out, just blinking them repeatedly. And then I had another 20 cards in my hand. And I ended the game by saying, hey, I have to leave for another party, so I'm going to board wipe and blink all my creatures. Don't scoop, don't do anything. Just keep playing as the game exists right now.
Yep. Nice.
And I said, I apologize. I feel really bad. I played this kind of deck against you guys. I said, no, it was super cool to see. You know, we want to get there eventually in our EDH lifespan.
See, I enjoy people who, like, I'm not a big combo player myself, and it doesn't bother me to play against people who play combo, but I enjoy the person who's comboing, goes off, shows the kill for everybody, and goes, stop, don't pick up your cards. I'm
just keep playing it out.
I'm a scoop here. You guys keep playing.
And even if I wouldn't have had to leave, I would have done that too. I would have said, here's how I'm going to do it.
Yep.
Keep playing, and, you know, I'll watch. I'll help you guys. You know, I'll help you guys play against each other is what I probably would have done if I would have stuck around.
That's not even really a combo. It's just mostly like the board state is changing to the point where you're just going to win.
Right.
It's pretty much a lockout is what it is.
Yep. Then I played it quite a bit the other night at the shop. Got a hardcore win against our friend Frank and Adam.
I heard a lot of cursing coming from that table in that game, but I didn't see anything that happened.
Oh, a lot of politics. And Adam was playing his Erebos deck. Frank was playing Gave.
The Guru of Spores, which is a good deck.
And I don't know if he just...
Probably his best deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just couldn't get online. I don't know what he was doing. But, I mean, he played Glarus Abdul. That slowed me down a bit, but I found a way to get around it. It just ended with me saying, hey, I can go infinite and create infinite mana and play Sphinx's Rev, because I was at like 9 life. It was, I had to win or not, and they're like, yeah, you have us, because I had a Rift lock, I had a Render Silent lock, I think
Nice.
I had Panharmonicon out too, so everything was bringing back 2 things.
Yep.
So yeah, Brago is much more consistent. I like it. It really is dependent on the opening hand, though, and it's teaching me how to play not aggressive for once. That was the big problem with that deck, is I always played aggressive, played out my hand, and was SOL after that.
Well, that's a tricky thing to learn too, is to learn that each one of your decks has to play a different way. Because it's easy to just do the same thing for every deck. But that's not how
Yeah.
you. If you're really wanting to like move up to the next level, you have to learn that.
Yep. The biggest thing that I see a lot of newer players struggle with is mulligan. You got to kind of be
Yes.
aggressive when you mulligan.
Yeah.
Especially in Commander, when you get a free mulligan, I'd go for it all day long.
Right.
If you're in doubt, usually,
Yep.
particularly if you've got a good land base and a good amount of rocks in there, you can afford that free mulligan usually.
Yeah. Unless
not-
I just want to sit there and kick back and chill and just BS with everybody. I'm just looking at my opening hand. Oh, 6 lands. Sure, let's play this.
And then I did play one game with Dramoka last night against Frank and Adam. That game was a little more intense because it came down to I was playing Dramoka, Adam was playing Doran, and Frank was playing Marchesa.
Ooh.
That's my nemesis.
Marchesa's a frustrating deck to play against.
It is.
It came down to some like interesting, hey Adam, you need to anguish on making something right now or else Frank's going to win. There were some interesting combat math because I had Dramoka and Archangel Thune and True Conviction out. Blocks were declared and then Frank stole my stuff, which made me really mad. And
Was there an insurrection cast at one point?
Insurrection was going to win the game because I looked at Adam, I said, the smart move, even though it would go back on my word, is to kill you, even though I promised to not do that. Because I think I would have gained like 15 life to survive Frank.
You learned your lesson now?
Yeah. But I said, the more I did the math, I'm like, it doesn't matter. Frank's going to win because if I tap out to kill you, Adam, Frank has 30 damage on board. And then Frank goes, and I just drew this, and he showed me Insurrection. I'm like, yeah, Frank wins no matter what.
Nice. Yeah, that insurrection just wins games.
It's one of those cards you have to go take a shower afterwards because you feel dirty.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that,
I don't think he does, though.
so I won a game with my Glissa deck with a Torment of Hailfire, and that's a need to take a shower after card.
Yeah, but we'll put this in perspective with your Glissa deck, just how slow
It's
that
a
deck
super
is.
slow deck.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's almost like you're playing blue-white control. It's super slow, but you're playing Golgari.
Yes.
I don't understand why it is so slow as it is.
I mean, I'm running bad Death Touch creatures. A lot of them are bad creatures.
Yeah,
There's
they are.
There's a Death Gaze Cockatrice in there, which is in. I checked an EDH rec one time. It's in like 12 decks or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
And those other 11 people are wrong. Like, it shouldn't be in their deck. like it works in mine, but it shouldn't be in anyone else's deck. So yeah, it's tough to win games. Like, it's a good deck. It controls the board, but I need win conditions, and
Yep.
and that's why I run it in that deck and that deck alone. But it just never feels like a good win.
I suppose.
Like the game before that, I was playing my Talren deck, and I wound up getting a win because I had a Docent of Perfection out that had been Oblivion ringed, but I still had like a handful of tokens off it that were wizards. So I attacked, and the person I was attacking didn't block because it was like 6 or 7 damage from wizards. But then I boomeranged the O-ring off of the Docent, who came back into play. And then I cast, I don't know if it was an Anticipator or what it was, some instant draw spell, which gave me another wizard, which flipped the Docent back over to give all the guys their buffs to swing for lethal. Like, that feels good. That felt like I earned that win. I did 3 or 4 things to get me in a position, and then I had to do combat tricks, and I felt like I deserved that. Torment doesn't ever feel that way. It just feels like I want to apologize. Like, Torment of Hellfire for 26. Sorry.
I think the difference, though, between Torment of Hailfire and Insurrection is Insurrection, you can just do nothing because you're going to take everybody's creatures.
Torment, you have to have the mana. You have to have gotten a Cabal Coffers and a
Right.
Urborg
To
and
really
something
abuse
else. Yeah, that's true.
You can't Insurrection on turn 7 like you can
Right.
Torment of Hailfire or turn 4 or whatever.
Yeah, Insurrection, you have to build up a board state. I mean, that's very true. But it doesn't feel like a great win. I did have another game that had kind of a funny resolution. It was my Mina and Den deck, and I had an Uvenwald Hydra out that had got up to like 14-14 or something because of the lands I had in play. And I was ahead, but like not by enough that anyone was probably scared of me. But because the Hydra was so big and it had reach and it was keeping like 2 other flyers at bay, I figured someone was going to try to remove it. So I kept 4 mana free at the end of my turn for Momentous Fall, figuring if someone goes to swords it or something, I might as well drop 14 or 16 cards, whatever it was. The person to my left who went next cast a Great Aurora, which you shuffle all permanents in play, and then all cards
From your hand.
into your
I think
library.
It's all non-land permanents? Or
Nope.
is it all permanent?
No, all permanent.
Lands
All
go
permanent.
to.
And then draw that many cards. Then you may put any lands that you draw into play. So it wasn't a bad play. It kind of was a reset because everyone was relatively even, except for I was able to at instant speed kill that Hydra and draw 14 or 16 cards, whatever it was. That put me way ahead. Then when I got all those in hand, it was, of course, half of them were lands or so, of which one was a Valkut and one was a Glacial Chasm, so no one could attack me. And one of them was the Nissa Vital Force. So the Chasm kept her protected. So like the next turn, I ulted her. And then I had Escape Shift was one of the cards I drew. And I had played a Tunneling Geopede as well. So when a land comes into play, it deals it. So I just killed everyone in like 2 turns from just playing lands. Escape Shift, Splendid Reclamation. I mean, I did 40 damage to everybody in like 1 turn. But that also felt like I earned that, even though someone else did the heavy lift. Someone else set me up for it. But like it felt like I did enough things that felt fine.
Yep, it was a combination of things that achieved it for you.
We also had 2 games in a row back to back that Max was in that were decided with the most busted card in Commander.
It is.
Dragon Throne of Tarkir. Said no one ever.
I Max Crandall of Commander Central. I'm saying that is the most broken card in EDH.
It felt like it in those back to back games.
Yes.
So you're taking back your Cyclonic Rift.
Rift is not busted.
Rift is not busted
Dragon
at all.
Throne of Tarkir is where it's at. This message brought to you by New Glarus Blacktop IPA, which we're drinking here and making rash proclamations.
Decisions.
Anything else happening in games that were worth talking about?
I got Winter Orbed on turn 3, playing Max's Brago
On
deck.
turn 3? That's harsh.
Well, it was a turn 1 peak for my buddy who was playing. He was playing Arkham Dax and combo.
His 1v1.
Yep, his
Arkham
1v1.
combo.
He peaked, and then he played some mana rocks and that stuff, so he was way up on the mana curve. And then turn 3 clairvoyances, and then just go straight into fabricate into Winter Orb. And he's like, "Yep, you're not doing anything because I don't like how your hand looks."
Did you get past that eventually?
No.
Did he
tough to
win?
deal with.
Yes, he won.
Just combo. Soul Road was combo.
Yep. I mean, I was burning everything I possibly could to get rid of his combo pieces and that stuff, and eventually he just hit the right step and was able to do it.
Well, Max mentioned making changes to his Brago deck. So, has anyone else made any changes lately that are worth talking about, either good or bad?
Just for Brago, for me.
Well, I believe, Max, there's a land that showed up recently in your Dramoka deck.
It is, but we'll talk about that later.
Talk about that later. All right.
Ooh.
There's one in my Glissa deck. I noticed this is the second game in a row, I think, where I played a Crucible Worlds, and then literally had nothing to do with it for like 5 or 6 turns. Eventually, I think I drew a Strip Mine. I was able to kill like Nykthos and something else. I went back and looked. There's just not enough lands in that deck to run a Strip Mine. Or, excuse me, to run a Crucible Worlds.
Agreed.
And then I was like, so why am I running it? I'm like, because it's the Judge foil with like the old border on it, and it looks awesome. Like that's the reason I don't want to take it out, because it looks awesome. I'm like, that's not a reason to run a card. I mean, it is, but so that's gonna get replaced with something else. I haven't figured out what yet, but I'm gonna have to pull that out.
Now, if you went, because I know you guys are more true blue to your colors with fetches, but if you went and put every black and every green fetch in
If I
there,
put
then
every
it would
fetch
be
in
worth
there,
it.
then it would probably be worth it.
Yep.
And there's definitely been times when I've like kept an opening hand of 2 lands, one of which is a fetch and one of which is a Crucible. And like, okay, if I can draw that 3rd land with that Crucible, I can just play that fetch 15 times. I'll be fine.
Yep.
So that's happened, but there's also just if there's multiple games where a card is dead, it just shouldn't be in your deck.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather, especially in a deck like that, seeing how it's Tribal Death Touch, but in green, I'd rather run the Runenap Excavator. God, I cannot talk today.
Because at least it's a body.
Yeah, it's a body that can keep swinging, too.
I think I'm probably going to wind up trying Nemesis Mask again.
Okay.
Or maybe the new black green flip enchantment from Rivals that we'll talk about next week, I'm sure.
I'm going to destroy that as soon as it comes out. I don't care what else you have on the field. Just going to
I think it's
blow
good.
that
It's
thing
good,
up.
but it's not. There's definitely scarier ones that we've seen so far.
Right.
But we'll get to that next week.
Oh, joy. So speaking of next week, we'll talk about some social media. Been hearing a lot from everyone on their opinions and on the spoilers that have been coming out.
We've been posting a lot of cards as they get released, and people have been pretty good about giving us responses to them.
Yeah, like my Twitter blows up all the time.
Mine too.
I can't even keep up with it. It's like I look at it, I'm like, okay, and then all of a sudden, boom, and I'm like, whoa, where did this conversation come from? And I have to backtrack it. And
I think maybe next week, when we do some of the reviews, we'll go into a few people's comments. That would be, I think, a good idea.
Yep. For everyone, you can reach us on Twitter at CMDR Central. Search us up on Facebook at Commander Central. You can find us online at commandercentral.com, and you can search us up on YouTube at Commander Central.
And our Facebook URL is now a real URL, I believe.
Our YouTube URL.
Sorry, YouTube, yeah.
Yep, it's youtube.com/c/CMDR Central.
How about news? Anything?
Rivals of Ixalan spoilers are happening right now
We're
this
in the
week.
middle of it.
So like Dana said, next Monday we'll be recording our set review show, which will launch the Monday after pre-release.
Yep.
Yeah, or you can just be like Dana and playing illegal cards too, like I heard last night.
I did. I played, what was it, Galta, Primal Hunger?
Yes.
In a game?
I heard you play that,
Yep.
and someone's like, wait, that's not released yet.
I copied it.
Oh,
Max
did you?
did. I played it and Max copied it.
I had a clever impersonator. I'm like, well, that's the only good target.
See, I seriously wonder if it would be legal for play since they released it so early.
Nope, not till set.
Technically, it's not. I mean,
Okay.
nobody cared. I told them as I was like, by the way, I'm playing this. No one cared.
I tried to get Phil to throw you out,
You
but
did. You did. All right. So a couple weeks ago on YouTube, user Nick Sikowski messaged us and said, hey, could you guys do a video on your favorite budget cards? Maybe each of you do a top 10 under $1. So we're not going to do a video beyond this. Will be a video on YouTube. But we're going to talk budget cards and our favorite budget cards of each type.
excluding planeswalkers.
Excluding Planeswalkers, because there's no budget Planeswalkers that are under $1.
There's
and
some
also
that are awfully close.
there's also, we're not going to do tribal because there's like 50 tribal cards. It's just not really worth getting into.
Right.
And we decided just arbitrarily to use Return to Ravnica for our cutoff. So we're going to try to do stuff older than Return to Ravnica just because we want to get into things maybe a little bit more obscure that people don't know about that are cheap but playable cards. So let's talk artifacts first. What artifacts do you guys think are really playable, solid budget artifacts that people should be considering for decks?
I will start because I took the noob canoe on this.
Did you?
I'm saying the signets.
They are all. I mean, I immediately thought of those and I was like,
Yep.
well, it's too easy. I'm not going to run the Signet.
And
There's
I,
a lot of them when we did this. I was like, no, that's too easy.
yeah,
The Signets and the Talismans are all probably should be in most decks.
yeah, all the signets from Modern Masters are under $1.
Yep.
If
I
you
think the
go-
Talismans are like closer to
Yep.
$1 to $2, but I mean, they're still pretty budget.
Yeah,
So I went real old school,
All right.
and we got some Glasses of Urza.
That's the mountains are
Nope,
plains.
It's a 1-drop artifact that you tap and look
Look
at
at a hand.
Look at a player's hand.
Sunglasses of Urza is what I'm thinking of. I think.
is it Ray-Bans or Oakleys?
They're like
Ooh.
John Lennon, like round granny glasses. I think in the art. I like that. I've never ran it in a deck.
I really want to run it. I don't actually own one, but I've really always wanted to run it because I've noticed lately that the way I've been playing, I've been like tweaking it on curve for my decks. I need to know what's going on in people's hands instead of just running blindly into stuff.
Sure.
Especially the person who's playing the removal colors.
And the fact that you can reuse it is
Yep.
really nice. I've never ran it or seen it ran either, but it's a solid card. I had a couple different mana rocks. I was looking at Everflowing Chalice and I was looking at Mind Stone, both of which are cheap, but they're
Yes.
pretty heavily played. But they're absolutely great cards that you should run. They're good budget choices. So I wound up going with Cold Steel Heart,
Very good card.
which is from Cold Snap. It only has one reprinting, which was in Commander 2015, but it's in about 5,000 decks in EDH Rec, so it gets played, but it's not heavily played or anything. 2 mana, which is a nice spot to play a mana rock. It does come into play tapped, which isn't great, but you can make it be any mana. So like you pick the color that you want it to produce, and it produces that for you, so you can fix whatever you need fixing.
Yep.
Other kind of nice thing about it is it's a snow artifact. So if you're running scrying sheets or something like that, and you know, in your monocolored deck, because you're running snowlands, and I think scrying sheets is a pretty decent land in a monocolored deck running snowlands.
Yep.
It also hits. So if you flip up Cold Steel Heart with scrying sheets, it goes in your hand. And I've done that. Like I've done it like once, but in a mono white deck where you need a bunch of mana rocks because you have no ramp, and if you're playing snowlands because you're using an extra planar lens or something, but even if you're not, it's a perfectly valid mana rock.
It's very good. There's another one that's almost identical to it called Thematic Compass, which is a 2-mana mana rock that comes into play tapped, and it creates a color of a land that you control.
No, Thematic Compass is the Ixalan flip
Is
one.
it? Which one am I thinking of?
You're thinking of, but it's
the compass. It's something compass.
something Star Compass. Yep,
There we go.
Star Compass, which comes into play tapped.
Yep.
And I think can it make any color, or do you pick a color, or is it a color?
It's a color of a basic land that you control.
Yep.
Also very good.
Yep.
Any other rocks anyone wants to talk about, or anything else from Artifacts?
No, Artifacts was actually quite hard for me because a lot of the ones that are like budget are a lot of newer cards.
Yep.
Or they're pretty well known. The other one I thought of, I was considering was Sears Sundial.
Ooh, that's another good one.
Which is a 4-drop. And I wouldn't run it outside of maybe a Boros deck or a mono white or mono red. But whenever a land comes into play, you can spend 2 and draw a card.
Yep.
And in those particular colors where you don't have great draw, I mean, it's done really good work for me in mono white before.
Yep.
I thought about I think it's called Druidic Satchel.
Yes, I was just about to say that.
Yep, that was another one that I've never actually played it, but as going through the budget cards, I was like, well, this could definitely be playable.
In a token deck, that's kind of playable.
It always gets the cut. I always try to slam it in a couple decks when I build them, and it's always in that 108 spot where it just doesn't make the cut.
All right. How about creatures?
Oh, I had a hard time with creatures. There are a lot of them to go through, so I went real noobish like Max did on the last one.
I think I would fall into that category again on this one. I chose Steel Hellkite.
That's under $1.
It is under $1 because it's been reprinted in almost every Commander set.
Steel Hellkite, I've almost never seen it do anything in a game because everyone removes it immediately because they don't want to deal with it.
Yep.
So that's a good sign. Like a card that never gets anything accomplished because it eats removal is, I think, a good sign.
It is in 16,000 decks on EDH Rec.
Like a lot of them probably precons. Like
right.
People just put their precon up.
A lot of them, like Dana said, it eats removal right away. It never sits on my board state long enough in Dromoka to activate its ability. And the 2 abilities it has is great. It has Fire Breathing. And then if it hits, you can pay X and then destroy all non-land permanents of CMC equaling X that player controls.
Yep.
I actually tutored up a Swords to Plowshares last night when I was playing my Tesa deck because someone played a Steel Hellkite. And I'm like, if that comes at me, he can spend 1 mana because it's kind of a token-based deck and kill by like 9 or 10 tokens I thought that I was needing to, keep the game going. So I tutored up a Swords to Plowshares. I'm like, if he comes at me, I got to kill that Steel Hellkite. It can't swing through.
And it is colorless, so if you need a flyer, it can go in anything.
Yep, that is true. I went with the old Muldrifter because of its versatility.
Oh yeah, Muldrifter's sub-$1 too.
ETB, even the original printing of Lorwyn is sub-$1.
Yep.
Well, in worst case, even if you never ever hard cast it, 3 mana to draw 2 cards is reasonable. If you just evoke it.
And if you draw him late game, then he's a 2/2 flyer for 5, which isn't great, but you're still netting 2 cards out of it.
And you can go to graveyard triggers, and you can. I mean, there's lots of things you can do with Muldrifter.
He's got so much versatility built into him that it's worth it almost always to play it in blue if you can.
For sure. One of mine, I had Reassembling Skeleton.
Of course you did.
Out of Magic 2011. It's been reprinted 6 times. Worst case scenario, it's a repeatable chump blocker. For those that don't know, it's a Skeleton Warrior 1/1 for 2 mana. But you can spend 2, a black and a colorless, to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So worst case, it's a chump that you can bring back for 2 mana and have it be there to chump next turn. But you can just do ridiculously abusive stuff with it. I mean, it regularly is a win condition in my Tesa deck where I'll play Captive's Crusade and then sack it, bring it back, 8 or 10 times to put +1 counters on every one of my tokens and swing to kill somebody.
Yeah.
So it's just a really solid card, even if you're not doing abusive stuff with it, but there's so much abusive stuff you can do with it.
Yeah, skeletons should not be able to reassemble. That's just not how it works.
I also had, just generically speaking, 1 mana green mana dorks.
Elves, yep.
I mean, Landwar elves or elves,
Avacyn's
Findlehorn
Pilgrim.
elves, Avacyn's Pilgrim.
Yeah.
I personally tend to not run mana dorks. Aside from, I think Birds of Paradise is a really good one. But like, if you're a bargain player, if you're building a cheap deck, there's way worse things you can throw in your deck than a bunch of 1 mana dorks that are going to get out whatever your commander is, whatever your big beater is.
And speaking of elves, I did have wood elves on here as well.
3 mana to ramp a land.
Any forest.
And it's a blocker.
Yep.
And you can recur it in Marin, or you can recur it in Karador or whatever. Or throw it underneath a Mimic Vat. Or, I mean, yeah, what else is a really good card?
Yes, it is.
Like there's been times when I've had like something huge under make that, and someone puts their Wood Elves in and it dies, and I'm like, man, I'd rather have that Wood Elves than this like really good creature just to ramp every single turn.
I can agree with that.
Another one along those lines is Seed Guy Dash. So it's the reverse.
Yep.
When it dies, you get 3 forests.
Ooh.
And it is any forest.
Right. Yeah.
But it's 5 mana for a 4/4. But in a Marin deck or a Carador deck, it does work.
It's one of those cards you just are like, roar, just jam it in every time you can.
I will block every time with that.
This is an artifact, so I guess it could have gone on either creatures or artifacts, but Mere Battlesphere
Ugh.
is, I mean, it's 7 mana, but it's a cheap card, and if you cast it successfully and no one has an answer, you can kill somebody with it really easily.
Yep.
A lot of times I see that card played. It's played in a deck that's going to reoccur it or abuse its ETB ability.
It comes into play, I've got a Panharmonicon out, so there's now 8 Mers out, so now I'm going to do 8 damage and give it +8/+8 next
Or I
turn
have a
with swings.
doubling season out in ETBs,
Yeah.
and I get however many more. And
You got to look at it like this: 7 mana for 4 creatures, because he makes 3 mirrors, 4
He makes
mirrors.
4 Mirrors
So
and
5.
himself.
So
Yep,
7
5.
mana for 5 creatures. That's a good deal.
One of which is a 3/7, his base. I think he's a 3/7. 4/7 at
4/7.
base. 7 mana for a 4/7 isn't terrible on its own, let alone when it makes the Mers and has the ability to tap them, to buff it,
and shoot.
Yeah.
and shoot on top of it.
Because he shoots for 8 then.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that card. It doesn't go in every deck, and I do actually think it's one of those cards I've seen people playing in a deck, so I'm like, that shouldn't maybe be in your deck. It
Well-
doesn't get enough done. But decks where it works, it does work.
I think that point right there is kind of on Wizards because they swam it in a lot of precons.
Yeah, it was in a handful of different precons.
Just because they can.
It's also one of those cards that it's been reprinted so much the price is cheap, so they're not afraid to throw it in a deck now.
Yep.
Right.
And to a new player, it looks, ooh.
Ooh, very good.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a new player, you're cracking packs. You're like, oh, stupid land in my rare slot. I hate you. Throw it off to the side.
Right.
Oh, yeah, a 9/9 for 12 with trample. That's what I'm talking about.
2 years later, that land is $20.
Yup.
So what about enchantments?
I just was complaining about this online to somebody today about this one enchantment. I'm like, how has this never been reprinted? And I probably have on this show. And mine is Mystic Remora out of Ice Age.
Yep.
It's in like 9,000 decks in the HRX, so it does get played. 1 mana enchantment that has cumulative upkeep 1. So every turn you have to pay a mana, pay 1 mana, then 2, then 3. But whenever target opponent successfully casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card. That player may pay 4 to counter this. And that's actually not even that's the original text.
I do believe it was errata to whenever any opponent.
Whenever any opponent
Yep.
casts a spell, a non-creature spell, you draw a card unless they pay 4. Unlike Rhystic Study, where smart players pay the tax, you almost can't with Mystic Remora most of the time.
Especially on turn 2.
Or even on turn 4, like no one is going to have 4 mana free to pay on their
especially when you're
non-creature
trying to
spell.
be on curve.
And that's the perfect time to drop it, is like turn 3 or 4. You can and you don't need to keep it around long. It doesn't need to stay there for 5 turns. If it stays there for 2 turns and you've dropped it at the right point in the game, you could draw 6, 8, 10 cards off it. And I have. And that's before we even get to things like Solemnity, making it so it doesn't get counters, or being able to blink it with Brago so it only ever costs you 1.
Yep.
So if you're playing blue and you need some card draw, repeatable card draw, Mystic Remora is a great alternative to Rhystic Study. If not, running both.
Oh, I would definitely run both.
Oh, yeah.
So what else do you guys have?
Chris?
I have a lot of them.
I have at least 3.
So when I first started doing my notes, I had thought that we were doing a card for each color.
Okay.
So I text Max this morning. I'm like, that's how we're supposed to do it, right? And he's like, no, we're supposed to do like a
No.
card of each type. I'm like, oh. So then I posted in our Slack and you didn't reply. I'm like, well, you know what? Screw this. I'm
doing
gonna
it all.
I'm gonna do for each of our types. I'm gonna do one for each color, just to be sure.
wow.
So I'm on each. I'm there for everything, no matter where we're going.
All right, you dug deep.
Overachiever.
That's the extra that Chris brings to this show for all you listeners out there.
Well, then when you post your notes for us, I got like halfway through mine, redoing mine. I'm like, oh, I'm done. We're not doing this anymore.
I don't need 50 cards.
So I'm gonna pick one of them to start with, and we'll go with Planar Void. It's a 1 mana black enchantment that whenever a card enters the graveyard, it is exiled instead.
That's pretty cool.
It's Leyline of the Void that hits everybody.
Yep.
But it costs 1 mana.
Yep, but it doesn't actually. But it The other ones read that they're exiled instead of hitting the graveyard.
Yep.
This one reads that it hits the graveyard, then gets
So
exiled.
you do get triggers off
Yes.
stuff going to the graveyard first.
But for 1 mana, it's
For
still
1 mana.
get rid of get rid of graveyards.
I have seen this card played.
I will go with my black enchantment of Greed.
Greed, nice.
Is Greed really that cheap now?
It's been printed
in like
1,000 times.
It's been like 3 or 4 precons
I
at
remember when the
least.
first time I bought a Greed, they were like $15, and I was like,
It was once an
"Ugh."
expensive
Yeah.
card.
Greed.
It was more than Phyrexian Arena at
Yep.
one point in time.
Surprisingly, it is only in 5,000 decks on EDH Rec.
And that's even after being in the Alloro precon,
Right.
which everyone and their
And-
brother bought.
And in a couple of the newer precons. I mean, it's just an all-around good enchantment. Pay some mana, lose some life, draw a card.
Was it a 3 mana casting cost on it?
Yes.
4.
Four,
Four.
and the one in a black to draw a
Yep.
card.
So it's pretty much Erebos is what it is.
Yeah. But you can there are plenty of decks I've seen that actively want the life loss. Marchesa for one. I've seen multiple Marchesa decks running Greed just because they want to not be on the throne.
How do you live playing against Marchesa players who get greedy and go, shockland, 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 pay all this life, and the next thing you know, they're at 6, and they're like, oh, no, I just die.
No, Greed's a really good one. It's similar to Greed. It doesn't make our cut because of it was in Return to Ravnica, but Undercity Connections, where you can tap the land to draw the card.
Yes.
It's like a nice little cheap hybrid too if you need.
Yep.
If you can't afford a Phyrexian Arena, although that's only like $4 or $5 now.
Yeah, it's not too much.
But still,
depending on the version that you get.
Both of those are nice alternatives to that if you're really trying to stay under $1.
I got another one. Familiar Ground.
What does that do?
It is a 3 mana green enchantment that gives your creatures menace.
Really?
There's Menace in green?
It's from 7th edition.
My mind just got blown.
the
I was
copy that-
not
so
aware
it
of
was
that.
7th edition, 6th edition, and Weatherlight. And they're all like 20-cent cards. But it reads that 2 colorless and 1 green enchantment. Each creature you control can't be blocked by more than 1 creature.
Wow, I had no idea that was
so
a
it's
thing.
reverse. It can't be. So it's not actually menace. It's reverse menace. It can only be blocked by 1 creature.
Okay, so it's not evasion.
Yes.
Still,
In green, when you're running Tramplish,
sure.
Do
Sure, in a
your-
stompy deck, I like. It's the opposite. So it's
yep,
not
it's
menace.
not actually menace. It's the
But
reverse.
if you're running
menace.
a big green stompy deck and you want to make sure people can't soak that damage up,
Yep.
that's a decent card. I like that. I've never
It
seen that.
needs to go in Brago now. Not Brago, Dramoka.
Dramoka.
That would be.
I
cheating
agree
if you
with
put it in
Dramoka.
Brago. Dramoka, that's interesting. I like that in Dramoka.
I have a Sharpie. I can change that,
I know
that
something you can
island.
alter.
Cool, I like that one.
It can be like that. That fairy. Is that a fairy? That green fairy, but it's a blue fairy, but with a green border or something like that.
Oh no, there was a Serendib Afreet. It was an Afreet.
That's what it is in a
It
free.
was an Arabian Night Afreet that got reprinted and revised, but it was a blue card, but they put a green border and a
Yes.
green casting cost on it.
Wow. So I have 2 other green enchantments.
Ooh.
Druid's Repository.
Yep. Very good enchantment.
That's under $1?
It is under $1.
So Drew's Repository is not good in a lot of decks.
Right.
And the decks where it's good, it is busted. It's ridiculous in token decks. And it's like put me over the top in so many
Yep.
games with my Edric deck.
So Druid's Repository is 1 green from Avacyn Restored, the only printing.
Really?
Whenever a
Huh.
creature you control attacks, put a charge counter on Druid's Repository. Remove a charge counter. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So I went about this list of going, what cards do I get to see played against me that screw me over?
That absolutely
And
does.
this in Frank's Gave deck, when he attacks with those 02, 01 plant tokens for no reason,
Just to put counters on
just
it.
to put counters on Druid's Repository.
Early on, he does that and throws a couple counters on it for bonus mana. Then you get that late game where he's like, I'm attacking with 9 gate
Yes.
tokens, and now there's 9 mana on it. And you're like, oh, man, now you just doubled what you can do next turn.
And
And you can move it at instant speed. It's not like restricted to
nope.
like Black Market where it's your main phase or Braid
Right.
of Fire where it's your upkeep. Yeah, that's a good call. I wasn't even thinking of that.
And it is in only 1,400 decks on EDH Rec.
And that kind of makes sense because it's only good in certain, like in heavy creature decks. But still, I like that. Good call.
And my final one is Beastmaster's Ascension.
Is that really now sub $1?
You know how many times they printed that? Oh my gosh.
Man, I remember years ago looking at it and I was like, oh man, $7 for that? I'm like, I'm not sure.
I remember that as well. Now, so the most expensive version of this card is from Zendikar, the original printing, at $1.25.
Wow.
The cheapest being Commander 2016 at 75 cents.
Nice.
And that is 2 and a green. Whenever a creature you control attacks, put a quest counter on it. As long as there are 7 or more counters on Beastmaster Ascension, creatures you control get +5/+5.
So here's a good rule of thumb. If you were going to run Beastmaster Ascension in your deck, you probably want to run Druid's Repository. They tend to kind of be cards that
Yes.
They play off
they
of each
play in
other.
the same deck and they play well.
And pro tip, don't play Druid's Repository on turn 3.
Yes.
Play it when you're ready to kill everybody.
Beastmaster Ascension. You mean.
Beastmaster
Yes,
Ascension.
Beastmaster Ascension. Sorry.
I have one more here. I'm gonna mention Vernal Bloom, that was in Urza's Saga originally, then 8th edition and 7th edition before that. It's a 4-mana enchantment, 3 and a green. Whenever a forest is tapped for mana, its controller adds a green to his mana pool.
Yep.
So you really only want to run it in mono green because you're probably not going to get enough value out of it in a 2-color deck unless you're really heavily on forest or something. But in my mono green deck, I first put it in my Recce deck, and I wasn't quite sure if I was going to like it because other people's forests count too. It's not just your forests. Whenever a forest is tapped, but I'm running 30 forests and only 5 or 6 non-basic. So I thought I will probably come out ahead. I don't think I've ever played it when I've looked around and been like, oh, he's got 1 forest, he's got 1 forest, maybe she might have 2, whatever. I've got 9. I'm like, that's absolutely worth me playing it. So if you're playing a mono green deck, unless you're playing a bunch of other people playing mono green decks, or unless your friends all just run basic lands, it's almost always worth running in a mono green deck. It's a mana doubler for less than $1. So any other enchantments worth going into?
I have 2 of them. One is Sulfuric Vortex, which is one of my favorite cards. 3 mana enchantment. Players can't gain life, and then during each player's upkeep, they take 2 damage. And then the other one is Telepathy. 1 mana blue enchantment. Your opponents play with their hands revealed.
I was just going to bring this up when you said you want to, for Urza's Quest. I'm like, why
Yep.
don't you just play Telepathy, but it's blue.
Yep. I like those cards, and having your opponents play with their hands revealed and you don't with Telepathy, then all your other opponents can look at each other's hands and
Right.
be like, oh, so this is what's going on. You're just sitting back going, mwahaha.
And Telepathy makes that interesting point of, do I want to destroy it? Because now I know what that black-white player has, and I
Yep.
know what that green-white player has.
1 mana for it is really, really efficient.
Right.
I've got one more. No one's mentioned any auras so far. So, like, this is the only
I
aura.
tried to avoid auras. I tried to make it more of a permanent based enchantment that's like doing something overall than just on a creature.
Well, here's my aura is Lignify. Mono green,
So good.
1 and a colorless and a green for a tribal enchantment tree folk aura. Enchanted creature is a 0/4 tree folk with no abilities. I know some people like the Oblivion Ring kind of effects that exile a creature, but if it's their commander, they can just put it in the command zone and bring it back. What I love about Lignify or Darksteel Mutation or Imprison in the Moon or Song of the Dryads, those 4 in particular, is they just make your commander do nothing.
Yep.
They turn it into a 0/4, and I don't care about a 0/4 on the ground. Like if you're stymieing me with a 0/4 blocker on the ground, I don't deserve to win or do anything in the game. If that's what's preventing me from winning the game is your 0/4 tree folk, that's my fault. But turning your commander off, but not letting you be able to bring it back to the command zone
Yes.
is invaluable against a lot of decks.
Yeah, and then it almost forces the person to block when someone comes in or try to kill it themselves to get it back if they're really reliant on their commander.
And then other people sometimes do weird things like, oh, okay, that Kali is completely shut off right now. Maybe I don't want to kill the person who cast Lignify because then Lignify falls off and Kalia comes back into play. It creates kind of a political board state as well.
I've never experienced that before.
No, I've actually,
No.
not with Kali, but I've actually had people do I don't know if I want to kill you because you've got that thing locked down.
Nope,
See, I
not
do it
me.
the other way.
Right.
I just, like, if I still consider you a threat, I keep pinging at you until you get really low in life, and I'm like,
Dang,
okay,
kill everyone at once.
you're just like, I just have to like ping you with one guy and you're dead. So I'm gonna go this way now.
Now you're my plaything. Entertain me. So basically, it's a kind of a weaker Song of the Dryads. Song of the Dryads is $3 or $4, I think, if not more.
It's over 5.
Oh
I
wow!
want to say it was close to 10 at one point.
And Song hits multiple things, whereas this is just creatures.
Yes.
But being able to just turn a creature into something junky is an ability I love, even if it's sorcery speed.
Song is 5. It used to be
Wow.
close to 10 before Commander's Anthology.
Oh, thank God.
And then that reprint, the only other reprint, cut the price in half.
Yeah.
Is that it for enchantments?
That's it for me.
That's all I got.
All right. Let's look at instants.
Ooh, I have 2 of them.
So I'll go with my first one here. It's originally from Time Spiral. It's had 2 reprints in Commander. It's in 7,000 decks. Costs 2 black and a colorless. Instant speed.
Can I guess?
What's your guess?
It's the split second one.
Sudden spoiling. The split second.
Sudden spoiling.
So it's a modular card that isn't really modular, because what it does is until the end of turn, creatures target player controls lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 0-2. So you can use it as a pseudo fog. I mean, it doesn't always work if it has swords on it, or if it has, +1 counters or something. But
Yep.
I've used it as a fog plenty of times, or I've used it when I've got 3 flyers. I'm going to swing on the other person has blockers. I can sudden spoiling so your creatures lose flying.
Yep.
Or someone goes to, even if I want to do a heroic intervention in response to a board wipe, sudden spoiling, you remove that indestructible. I mean, there's a gazillion tricks you can do with it, and they're almost always good.
Sure.
Yep.
And the split second is really relevant on it as well.
Oh, that's probably the most relevant part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
because then I can think back and I can say, well, Polymorph is just as almost identical to it, but
it
it's
doesn't have
not
split
because it doesn't
second.
have split second.
Although Polymorphous Jeff is a really good card too.
Yes.
Like I run that in decks.
Yep.
But sudden spoiling is even better.
Yeah.
So what else do you guys have?
I have 2, and they are almost identical. One is called Aura Mutation, and one is called
yeah.
Artifact Mutation.
Great cards.
Both 2 mana, one's Gruul, one's Selesnya, and they destroy an artifact or an enchantment, and you put X tokens into play, where X is the CMC of the card that you destroyed.
Yep.
If you're running some kind of a token deck where you have access to doubling season, they're even better.
No, I mean even if you're not, you get double the value out of it, because you destroy and you get a token.
Yep.
I've actually cast, I think, the Artifact Mutation against an indestructible artifact before. I don't remember what it was, just because those
Just to get the tokens.
the 2 causes are separate. You don't
Yep.
have to destroy it. So I can't remember if it was a Darksteel reactor or something, but like, I'll take the 7 tokens off this because I have a parallel lives. I'll draw
I've had it
14, and then
done.
I'll deal with the indestructible thing later on.
Yeah, I've had it done numerous times with the Aura Mutation on Mogus. When I'm playing Mogus, they're just like, boom, and get
Yep.
all the tokens.
It's funny you bring this up, because on Saturday, D20 had their New Year's Eve party, and our friend Blake was redoing his Thromach deck.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is a new one he's just put together or put back
He
together.
just put together, and I think he was trying to find room for Artifact Mutation is on the cusp. It's like card 101, 102, and I'm like, you're making tokens for Thromach to eat that needs to go in the deck over something like Unravel the Aether or
I would agree with that too.
So it's funny you bring that up, just because we just were talking about that the other day.
Yeah, talking about that party that we were at, that they trolled us hard with that plastic saran wrap ball that they did to us.
Yeah.
We had to unwrap a saran wrap ball with prizes inside using oven mitts alone.
And us 3 sat next to each other, so they just constantly made fun of the Commander Central guys.
I believe there's a video out there somewhere of that.
I almost had it. What was I, 5 for 5 on rolling doubles on the first roll?
I hate you for that. Cheater.
All right, what else do we have for instance here?
I have Back to Nature.
Oh,
It
nice.
is
all enchantments.
Yeah,
1 in a
instant
green,
speed.
instant speed, destroy all enchantments. Now, typically, I'm not a fan of these cards because they hurt my own stuff, but at 2 mana, it's easy to play before you drop that Mirari's Wake or that Beastmaster Ascension or that Sylvan Library to get rid of the stuff that really is valuable to your opponents. Or worst case, you take the loss, you get rid of your stuff because of that. All those important enchantments your opponents are playing just need to go away.
Yeah.
And
I agree with that 100%.
yep.
How about you, Chris? What do you got for us here?
Those are the 2 that I have. That was about the point when I said enough of doing all sorts of different ones.
I also had there's a couple different blue spells I was thinking of that I'm running in my Talrand deck. There's Perilous Research, which draws you 2, and you have to sacrifice a permanent but it's 2 mana at instant speed, so it's 1 in a blue, draw 2 cards, sacrifice a permanent. Well, like a Talrand deck, it makes you a token that you just then sacrifice. So essentially it winds up being 2 mana to draw 2. I'm not sure how many other decks I would run it in, but there are enough of those red-blue decks where people are running stuff like Docent of Perfection or what makes young pyromancer that makes a token. So you're just getting a token that you're sacrificing anyway. It winds up being just a 2-draw-2 spell.
Yep.
So I'm a fan of Perilous Research in a lot of decks. There's also Latnam's Legacy, where you draw 2 at instant speed, but you then have to shuffle a card from your hand back into your library. But, I mean, whether you're discarding or shuffling a card back in, it doesn't really matter. Particularly if it's a land, who cares?
True.
That's a really efficient draw spell in blue, too, I like a lot.
Max, I just looked up one that's very similar to the Back to Nature. It's called Patrician Scorn. I might have totally butchered the name.
I think that's how it's said.
Yep, it's a 4-mana instant. But if you played another white spell this turn, you may play it without paying its mana cost, and that destroys all enchantments as well.
That's interesting, and that's
Oh, wow.
3 and a white.
Yep,
Is
so
its
4
hard cast.
Yep. Otherwise, you can play for free if you already cast another white spell
You
this
cast
turn.
under white spell this turn, you may play it without paying its mana cost. Huh. That's actually kind of cool.
Path
As
to Exile.
As soon as Max
Boom.
said that, I was like, wait, I remember a card very similar to that.
Well, and even like ignoring the instant speed clause, even if it's on your turn and you've just cast a creature and you get to cast it for free, that's still probably worth doing even on your turn just to get it for free.
Yeah.
The only downfall is that if you're playing like mono white, you're probably relying a lot on your enchantments to do stuff for you.
Yeah.
So
But not all. There's enough mono white equipment decks that aren't running a
suppose,
lot
yeah.
of enchantments.
and just do that to just blow up all the enchantments.
That's a cool little card. I like that.
And it's in the cool future sight border.
It is.
I know. They need to come back with some borders like that. That was awesome.
All right. Is that it for instance?
I believe so.
Let's move on to lands.
Oh, I had such a hard time with this.
So we'll start with Max here because we kind of previewed this one back when we were talking about changes to decks.
We did. So a couple weeks ago, Dana, for my birthday, I think,
Yes.
got me a foil copy of Riftstone Portal. And for those who don't know what it does, is it taps for a colorless, or when it's in your graveyard, all your lands tap for green or white.
Very good card.
Yep. So I slotted this into Jamocha, and last night it did tons of work for me because I somehow cast Seasons Past on like turn 5, drew a bunch of cards, and I had no Reliquary Tower. So I'm like, well, buy Riftstone Portal.
Well, you aren't even like there are like I'm running it in my Sigarda deck, but I also have a crop rotation in there because I use it to fetch up either Nykthos or Sarah Sanctum. So like I might as well put Riftstone Portal in here because I happen to have it out. I can sack it to crop rotation. It's great in there.
Yep.
But even without having a way to sacrifice a land, there's enough times you discard cards that it's in a Selesnya deck, particularly if you don't have a perfect mana base. But even if you do, you have a perfect mana base in that deck pretty much.
Yes, I do.
And it's still good.
Yeah, I that card actually last night made it at the end game right before it all ended. Made me be able to cast 3 spells for 21 mana. Where if that wouldn't have been in my graveyard, if my graveyard had been exiled, I wouldn't have been able to do because I didn't have enough green or I didn't have enough white.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a fan of that card as well. Chris, what do you got?
I chose the original. I think I'm gonna call them bounce lands.
Oh,
The
the
ones that-
Ravnicas?
Yep, that come into play tapped and they create 2 mana.
Yep.
So either your Selesnya colors, your Izzet colors, or
You
whatever.
have to bounce the land back to your hand.
Yep, I chose those. They're all extremely cheap, and they've been reprinted once or twice at the most.
At least 3 times because they were in most of the 3-color commander decks.
Okay.
They were all reprinted in at least one Modern Master set, if not 2 of them.
I think it was Modern Masters 2 they got reprinted.
Yep.
And the bouncing a land back to your hand thing, no one enjoys. But there's been enough times I've bounced a Bajuka Bog back to my hand with one of those and then replayed it to hit someone else's graveyard. Or even been like, oh, you know what? Looking at what's in my hand, next turn, I don't need all this mana. I'm going to bounce this Temple back to my hand and replay it so I can get the Scry trigger.
Yep.
I mean, there's enough times that makes a difference.
And there have been times, like I play them in my Ural deck where it's just like, Urals takes a little while. Once you're up at about the 5 CMC, it just hits off real fast. Where in the early turns, like opening hand, you're like, well, on turn 3, I can just play that bounce land, or turn 2, I'll discard a card, whatever. But it's going to set me up, ahead a little bit.
And if you're playing a real fast aggro deck, you probably don't want to run them.
Yep.
But I mean, unless you're playing just bleeding edge fast Magic, most decks can afford to have that come into play taps and make 2 from then on out.
Sure.
I know Max doesn't like them.
I do not at all.
I don't run them in all my decks, but I run them in a couple still.
Yep.
Mine is Terrain Generator, It's like $1.20-ish, so
Yep.
it's slightly over, but it was close enough that I counted it.
You
Close
just
enough.
like the card that much.
I do. I like it a lot. It's from Nemesis originally. It's had one reprinting in the Jace versus Chandra dual deck, but that deck was reprinted in
Dual deck
whatever it was.
anthology.
Yeah, dual deck anthology. It's in about 6,000 decks in EDH Rec. So what it does is you can tap it for a colorless mana, or you can spend 2 and tap it and put a basic land card from your hand into play tapped. So it really has a home in, for the most part, probably monocolor decks where you're got a ton of basic lands, or in maybe a 2-color where you have a ton of basics as well, and you don't have other ways to ramp lands into play. I've got one in my black-white Tesa deck because I draw quite a few cards in there, and there's no way in black-white to play extra lands for the turn. And I ran it for a while in my Sphinx deck. I can't remember why I took it out, but I never bothered because I felt like I had too many non-utility or too many utility lands in the deck, and I was having problems with colors.
Okay.
So something had to come out. But in a deck that was less color intensive, even in 2 colors, it's fine.
Yeah, it's a really good card.
It's a great card.
So anything else?
I have one more.
All
As
right.
do I.
Temple of the False God.
Will be a controversial one.
It is under $1.
It is.
It is comes into play. It creates 2 mana, but you have to have 5 lands.
So so if you read Reddit is really against Temple of the False God.
We don't go to Reddit.
Reddit's against everything.
Reddit's Reddit. I understand the argument, which is there's enough times it can burn you, but it doesn't burn me. I don't run it in every deck, but the decks I run it, I've never had a problem.
It's just like one of those cards that I guess if you keep it in your opening hand and you only have 2 lands in that land, you probably should have just mulliganed that hand.
The problem with Temple of the False God is either bad deck building or bad decision making with regards to mulliganing.
Yeah,
like if you're keeping it as one of your 2 lands in your opening hand, that's just you being a bad player.
Yeah, and you can't. I mean, I could totally get in arguments with people about this, but you can't justify it being a bad card. Let's say you have an opening hand with 3 lands, you draw Temple and you never draw another land. Well, you would only be stuck on 4 lands anyways if you had Temple out.
Yep.
The amount of times it's been a problem versus times it's saved me where I'm like, oh man, that's going to let me go to 6 on turn 5, which lets me do this and this.
Yep.
I mean, and then every point thereafter, it's 2 mana on that land. I mean, it in itself pays 1 command tax on a commander.
That's exactly how I viewed it. It's always my first command tax land. Like,
Yep.
Cool, if I play this on turn 5 and Brago somehow died, I can still cast Brago on turn 5.
I don't put it in a 3-color deck.
No.
And I don't know if I run it in my monocolor decks because I tend to be a little bit leaner on my land count there. But it's in a couple of my 2-color decks, and it's just not ever a problem.
I've ran into the issue with it before, but it's not, like the fault of the card or anything else. It's just sometimes your decks is just like, no,
Yep.
You need to go home right now.
Yes.
You don't need to play anymore.
It sucks to see it on turn 4 and you draw it.
Yep.
Right.
But
and you're like, oh,
you can't help that.
Yeah.
And I don't think the amount of times that happens is at least based on my anecdotal experience, isn't enough to make me be like, this card isn't worth running.
Correct.
So people will disagree with that, I'm sure of it, but I tend to kind of like it as well.
I'll put another controversial land out there for you guys then. I chose Crystal Vein.
I like Crystal Vein.
I love Crystal Vein too.
I got to look that one up because I don't know what it does.
So it comes into play. You can tap it for 1 colorless. Or you can tap it and sacrifice it for 2 colorless. But it comes into play and you can do it at any point.
Okay.
It was in my Glissa deck once upon a time.
Yep, and that's probably why you had Crucible Worlds in
Well,
there.
I think, to go on a bit of a tangent or a bit of an aside here, I think Crucible is in the deck. Not only do I like the way it looks, at one point in time after I put the Gitrog monster in there, I'm like, well, I might as well put Crystal Veins in here too, because just in case, and it's a good card.
Yes.
But just in case I have Gitrog out, I can sack it. And then I'm like, well, if I'm running a couple of these kind of lands, I might as well put Crucible in.
Yeah, I think Crystal Veins, it's a good utility land. I mean, it cannot go in every deck by any means. But I mean, sometimes it's just that extra colorless that it could give you is huge.
Yeah.
And if you're running Gitrog Monster, where you get to draw
it
an
better
extra
be
card
in
off
there.
it, or if you're playing Titania, where you make a 5/3 elemental,
Yep.
yeah, it's a really good card.
Totally makes sense in those decks.
Croson Verge is one I have here. It is a better Myriad Landscape, maybe.
I agree with that.
And Myriad Landscape's a pretty good card.
In the colors.
In the colors.
In the
It doesn't
colors.
go to any color. Corrosion Verge enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can spend 2 to sacrifice Corrosion Verge and search your library for a forest card and a plains card and put them on the battlefield tapped. So it's the same wording as Myriad Landscape, except for instead of saying 2 of the same type of lands, it says forest and plains. But it doesn't say basic forest and plains.
Nope.
So the difference is you can grab 2 dual lands, you can grab 2 shocks, you can grab 2 cyclers. You basically can grab 2 lands that produce your 2 colors with your Corrosion Verge.
Yep. I play this in Ural, and I actually played this, I think it was like on turn 3, and a guy looked at the card and he's like, you shouldn't play that card. That card's not good. I'll give him a weird look, and I'm like, really? Did you read it? And he read it. He's like, no, that card's not good. I'm like, read it again. It says and. He read it again. He's like, forest and plains. I'm like, yeah, so I get both my shock lands, both my dual lands. He's like, okay, never mind what I just said.
That's a savanna
Yeah.
and a taiga.
Yep.
The downside here is it's green. Well, you're getting a forest, so you probably are playing colors that all have additional ways to ramp. If this was like get a mountain and a swamp,
Oh, that would be awesome.
It would be so good in Rakdos. As it is, it's just good in Selesnya.
You're right.
Would not be a $1 card if it was in Rakdos.
No, it would not.
Any color that isn't green, it'd be not a $1 card.
I have one more.
Oh, let's hear it.
Ghost Town out of Tempest. You can tap it for a colorless mana, or you can return Ghost Town to its owner's hand. Use this ability only during another player's turn.
Yes, I remember looking at that too. I wasn't quite sure how I would play it.
The only deck, I run it in one deck.
Mina and Den.
I run it in Mina and Den.
Makes
Because
sense.
it guarantees I can have an additional landfall trigger. If I'm looking at my hand and I have Mina and Den out, and I'm like, I can play 2 lands next turn, and I have none in my hand, so I'm not going to draw one. Because in that deck, when you're playing multiple lands or whatever, you oftentimes don't have lands in your hand. That's, I've discovered, is one of the kind of speed bumps in that deck, is that you need to have lands constantly in your hand. Ghost Town lets me kind of get a cheat landfall drop by bouncing it back and playing it again next turn.
Well, I've had to do Mina and Den's ability before when I've played your deck.
Yep. Just to get the landfall
Just
trigger.
to bounce to get a landfall trigger.
So I don't know if I'd run it outside. I don't know if you run it outside of a landfall deck, or maybe Gitrog or something like that as well. Because in those decks you tend to run landfall creatures as well. But in those decks you probably should be running Ghost Town. It's a really good card. Is that it for lands?
I believe so. I had a real hard problem with lands because I looked at them all and I'm like, well, that could be good. And I'm like, no, there's better. There's better.
And it's kind of the same as artifacts. If it's good, it can go into so many decks that the price kind of puts it above $1 oftentimes.
Yes.
So sorcery is the last category we're doing here.
My first one is Creeping Renaissance.
Oh, yeah.
And I chose this because it has screwed me over so many times in multiple games when my opponents play it. For those who don't know, I think it's 4 and 3 green.
3 and 2, I think.
Creeping Renaissance is 3 and 2 green. Choose a permanent type, return all cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to hand, and it has flashback for 5 and 2 green. So I've seen this in a Gitrog deck, returning all the lands. I've seen it in a Super Friends deck, returning all the Planeswalkers. I've seen it in an Elf Ball creature stompy deck where they just put all the creatures back.
Makes sense.
It hoses me every time it gets played against me.
Nice. I've seen it played multiple times, and it's always good. I agree. What do you got, Chris?
I have one because there are a million sorceries, and there could be. I wanted to pick like 5 million of them because they're all good ones. But actually, I'm going to do 2 because the other one's kind of a controversial one too. But Firecat Blitz.
Nice. I like Firecat Blitz. It's a really good card.
It is X and double red. Put X 1/1 Hellcats or something like that into play.
They're cat elementals.
They're Hellcats. They're on fire. Yeah. Has flashback for double red and sacrifice X mountains and put that many cat tokens into play. And they have haste on both of them. So
if you're playing a Perforos deck, it should be in your Perforos deck.
Yep.
If you're playing a Angry Omnath deck and you're running like a sack outlet kind of deck where you're sacking elementals, because they're elementals.
Yes, they are.
Hey, I'm going to make 7 or 8 fire cats, and I'm going to sack them all to Ajad's Altar, and you're taking 21 damage.
And I'm going to do it again.
I've got a ton of mana, and I'm going to flash it back. I got a ton of mana in my pool from Ajad's Altar now. It's a really, really good card, and it's very cheap. How about you, Max?
My other one is Seasons Past.
You're just a fan of Seasons Past.
I am, and the only reason I bring this up is I cast it 3 times last night in a single game.
Seasons Pass is not pre-return
It
to
is
Ravnica.
not.
Oh, it's not. Oh.
It's still a really good bargain card.
Okay, I will edit all of that out.
Well, we'll go to mine then. And someone today, it was today or yesterday in a different Slack, we're talking about cards. Someone's like, man, you really like this card a lot, don't you? I'm like, I'm going to mention it tonight in the podcast. So yes, Night's Whisper.
So good.
From Fifth Dawn originally, it has 2 reprintings. It's in just under 6,000 decks in EDH Rec. And I checked, it's in all but one of my decks that run black. It's 2 mana, a colorless and a black, sorcery, draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. It is as simple as it gets.
It's perfect. I mean, it's probably, in my opinion, maybe the best black draw spell.
Yes.
The competition would be Read the Bones, which didn't.
But
which
that's at 3 mana.
That's at 3.
So I mean, for 1 colorless and 1 black, so you only have to devote 1 actual color to it to net yourself 2 cards.
So over Sign in Blood, it is much easier to cast.
Much easier
Yes.
to cast. Although technically, Sign in Blood you can target.
Yeah.
So
I've totally done it before.
I have
Me
too.
too.
But Night's Whisper, being able to only require 1 black is a really big deal, especially like on turn 2 or 3 when you've opened up with a couple lands. You're like, I really need 1 more land. It digs you down to get that 4th land or whatever to then start doing the broken things you want to start doing. Yeah, and even late game. Like, I never feel bad drawing it late game because, I can afford 2 mana to dig down 2 more cards.
True.
It's just always useful, unless you're at like 3 life. And even then, I cast it the other day. I think I was at 6, and I was at 6 life in a game, and I cast it. I'm like, why not? I'm going to draw 2 cards. Let's see what happens. Because at that point, the difference between 6 and 4 and the game's gone along.
It's a third of your life.
You're just going to die. Like, if someone can kill you at 4, they can probably kill you at 6.
Yeah.
That's not always true, but
Yeah.
it's, that's pretty often the case. So I would also, on the same, they're not similar colored, but they're similar and they do the same thing. In other colors, you've got Magmatic Insight in red and Tormenting Voice. Insight is 1 red. I think Tormenting Voice is the same casting cost, but you have to discard a card.
Yep.
Those are both in red. You have Compulsive Research in blue, where you draw 2 and have to discard a land, I think. I forget how that one works. I should have written it down.
One of them is a land. Another one's an artifact.
I think Compulsive Research is 3, and you have to draw 2, and then you have to discard.
It's either a land or an artifact.
Yeah,
There's
forget.
2 of them that are identical like that.
But anyway, those like 2 mana ish draw spells, I would definitely have Chart of Course on here if it wasn't new. You should have those in your decks.
Yes.
And I didn't originally, like years ago. It took me several years to realize, because I remember at one point in time being like, why would I ever want to draw 2 cards? That's not enough.
Now,
It is enough. Like
especially at low mana cost, because
Yeah.
then it allows you to do something else with what you could have possibly drawn.
Absolutely. Right. It lets you have mana free to play something else.
Yeah.
Not that there isn't room for like your Reoccurring Insights or your Sphinx's Revelation, because those are perfectly good cards, but you can't just be running 7 mana draw spells either.
Yeah,
You
and
need to have that.
can't- Especially if you fall behind early in
Right.
the game, you can't drop a Sphinx's Rev on turn 3. It has
Absolutely.
to be turn 4 or turn 5 to
Yep.
get any use out of it.
So, any more sorceries or instants? Or sorceries, I should say.
Yeah, we're gonna go into
All
this
right.
one because I've always wanted to do this, and no one ever wants to do this with me. So I'm gonna name a card called Demonic Attorney.
Oh, that's one of the old anti cards?
Yes, it is. All the anti cards are below $1 unless you get them in Alpha or Beta. Then they're really expensive. But I've always wanted to ante.
You want to get someone to play for you, you for
Yes.
anti, all right?
I don't care what we ante. I'll take out one of my millions of basic lands, foil basic lands, and be like, let's just do a foil basic land antes. Let's do it that route.
What you do is you each buy a booster pack, and that's the ante.
Yes.
There we go. I like that. That's a good ending sorcery decision.
Yes.
There is Demonic Attorney. Good call. All right. Hopefully those were some good budget ideas for our listeners here. Those are all good playable cards.
Yeah.
Yep.
And even if you're not on a budget, a lot of those cards probably should be in your deck. But if you are, they definitely should be.
Yeah, I mean, now, we didn't by any means name all the good
No.
budget cards neither. There are tons of them, so.
And if you have any suggestions for us, we would gladly take them, and we'll mention them in show notes somewhere.
Or
On a
in
YouTube
budget
channel or something.
cards number 2
Absolutely.
down the road.
For sure. As kind of our side note exercise here, this is something that I wrote down, but we mentioned Beastmaster Ascension, and at one point in time being like, oh, $7 for that, I'm not paying that. This has changed, I'm sure, for you guys, because it has for me, but is there a point where you won't pay for it, or a card's too expensive, or what are the variables that make you not willing to put it in your deck?
I'm not a good person to ask because I play the format called Modern, where you just kind of suck it up and do it. So
I think I'm going to use Chromatic Lantern as an example, because Chromatic Lantern's over 10 now.
Sure.
It just keeps going
And
up.
it
too.
keeps going up, and it has had a reprinting. I mean, it's a $12 mana rock that makes all your lands tap for any color.
And it's probably worth, I mean...
It's worth $12.
It's worth $12. I mean, it's that good in a 3-color deck or more.
If there's something that does almost the same thing for cheaper, I'm going to go with that option. Obviously, like, a Shockland is somewhat comparable to a duel.
Sure.
Not 100%, but you're not going to drop $120 on a shock. You're going to drop $12. I just think it comes down to, is there something extremely comparable that does the same thing or almost the same thing?
One of the things that I found for me that factors into it is whether or not I think the card's going to stay at that price. Like, if I want a Phyrexian
Yep.
Tower for a deck. Phyrexian Tower is on the reserve list. That's a land where you can sacrifice a creature to get 2 black mana in your mana pool. That's $30 or so. If I really want one for a deck, I'd be perfectly fine trading for one or buying one, because I feel like that card's not going to be worth less than $30 for the most part. If it's a card that's like is going to crater after the reprint, like I don't have Wastelands in my decks, even though it's a drop down to 25-ish. But Wasteland's played in so few places, and it's needed by so few decks, that Wasteland is already, it's had that one reprinting, and it dropped from $80 to $25. One more reprinting takes it to $10.
Yep.
Or less. So I feel like Wasteland, I don't need it. I've already got Strip Mines, and it's not that much better than Ghost Quarter or Tech Edge. It's not worth me putting Wastelands in decks when it costs $25, because it's going to one day be worth less than that. I'm sure of it.
Right.
So that also is like something I think about. I'll pay money for a card if I think it's going to hold its value, but I'm not going to pay it if it's going to get reprinted into the ground. Okay, I think that is it for the dollar bin, the budget binder edition of Commander Central. We'll be back next week with our Rivals of Ixalan preview. Until then, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris. Happy New Year, everybody.